Hello everyone. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to protect your Android application using IBM Cloud App ID. Now, just to show a quick reminder, App ID is a service provided on IBM Cloud that allows you to easily integrate authentication and access control authorization capabilities into your applications. So as you can see on your screen, essentially App ID serves a purpose of connecting your applications to your identity providers and allowing your users to authenticate through those identity providers. Now, today I'm going to show you how to use App ID Android SDK, how to instrument Android application with App ID Android SDK, right? How to trigger the authentication flow, how to obtain access token and identity token, how to read information from those tokens. Right. And essentially have end-to-end protection flow for your mobile Android application. Now, if you've seen the first video in the series, you're familiar with the screenshot, with this chart, right? Essentially, what we're going to cover today is the left part. That's where your application is using App ID to authenticate applications and see whether those applications and users and see whether they have access, right? The YDC and all two workflows will be used here, and at the end your application will receive two JWTs, two tokens, access token and identity tokens, and those tokens will be validated, and then you'll be able to read the claims from those tokens in your application. So without further ado, let's start. So I got Android Studio here, and I will start by creating a new Android Studio project. So I will use something simple. I will use empty activity, right, for my purpose. I will click next. Okay, I will call it my sample application. Okay, and I will put it under video tutorials, right? The language will be Java. I will use Android 4.4. API level, I will leave all the defaults that I have here. Okay, and click finish. So after a few seconds, an Android project will be created for me. Right, let me quickly resize Android Studio so you can see the whole thing. Right, you can see that Gradle is running and it's configuring all the default settings, so running all the default scripts. Okay, and a few more seconds, it will be done. Okay, yep, so my application is ready, my application is done. So let's actually start this application in the emulator. I got an emulator here. Okay, and let application runs. Okay, so my emulator is right here. Okay, you will see in a second application starting, and that's going to be our starting point to start adding App ID assets, App ID SDK into the application. Okay, hello world, that's good enough for me to start with. My sample application, that's exactly what I've created. So currently it's an empty application, it doesn't have it has anything yet, right? And I'll start adding authentication into that application. Now, there are several ways in which you can get App ID SDK. First of all, you can go to our GitHub repo, right? The SDK is open sourced, and right here you got all the instructions for installing, excuse me, for installing that SDK, right? We're actually going to follow them, right? Another option is you can download a sample from our App ID dashboard, right? Or you can go to documentation, and documentation essentially explains you how to instrument Android application. It's same steps. So let's start. The first step is to add Jetpack repository to your build Gradle, right, at the end of the repositories section. Okay, so I'll copy this line. This is exactly what we need to add back into Android Studio. Okay, so under Gradle scripts, I got those two files. Okay, I'm looking for the top one. You can see Google and JCenter repositories are already here. So I will add Maven Jetpack, right? It will ask me, do I want to synchronize now? Yep. I'll click sync now, and everything is green, right? The synchronization was successfully done. So I'm done with this file. The next step is to add the dependency for App ID Client SDK. So I'm going to grab this line, right? I'm going to copy it. Okay, and if I go to my models here, right in the dependency section, I will add App ID SDK. And you know, as of this video, we actually got version 6 already of the SDK, so I'm going to change the version to 6 plus, and I'm going to synchronize it now. Now keep in mind that right here, Okay, we got an error. Yes, this is expected. We will resolve it in a second. Keep in mind that right here I'm using 6 plus syntax, so basically it's going to be the latest of 6 dot versions. Probably because before you release your application, you want to change it to some more specific version like 1.1.3, or at the moment we have 6.0.0. Okay, now the error message we are getting here. Right, so we need to change it to implementation, right? That's because I'm using the latest version of Android. Right? Let's try to sync it again. It should give us, okay, an error, manifest error message. Yes, as I said, this is expected, right? Because we still haven't done the last step of the description, is that we need to go to the build Gradle file of the application module and add this line to default config. Okay, so the last part in instrument in your application is we will open, right, the module, right, Gradle file. That's where we've added the dependency, and under default config we'll add this line. Okay, so let me synchronize now, and everything should be green. Yes, everything is green, everything is good. So this is basically where we're registering the app ID redirect scheme that will be used to trigger authentication. So that's pretty much it, right? Your application is now instrumented with app ID SDK, with the latest version of app ID SDK. Okay, so now let's start let's add some authentication related capabilities into your application. So if you recall, this is what application looks like right now. So I'll start with changing the application UI just a little bit. Okay, so it starts with a text view, right? So I will replace this text view with a different text view, right? Let me change it like this. I will copy it, so it will say click login, right, instead of hello world. And right after this text view, I will also put a button. Okay, I'm adding a button that's going to be a login button. So this is what my UI looks like. Okay, I got login button and the text saying click login. Okay, and currently it's highlighting an error because it's on click. It is expecting to see on login button click action, which I did not create yet, right? But I will actually do that in a second. So to summarize, my UI is dead simple. I got a login button, right, and then I have a text view which we will update, right, with authentication process status. Okay, so that's my very simple UI. Back to Java code. Okay, so let's see. First of all, I would need to have a reference to my text view and my button, and that's because I will be updating their content. Okay, so I'm adding button and text view classes here. Whoops. Okay, so whenever my application is created on create, I will find both of these views by ID. Okay, so I would have a reference, and then I would do app ID dot get instance dot initialize. I need to specify the context, so I will use application context here. Right, next I need to specify my tenant ID. I leave this blank for a second, and I will add it in a second. Right, and the last piece is my region, so I will use app ID US South, because that's where my app ID instance is. Okay, so this is the initialization code. Okay, I know that my app ID instance was provisioned in US South, right? And I also need to supply the tenant ID. Now, in order to get tenant ID, you can go to your application, to your app ID dashboard, right? And click on applications, right? Let's add an application. I will call it my Android app. Right, or you can use any of these credentials. They all have the same instance ID or tenant ID, right? You can open them, and there's a property here called tenant ID. I'm just going to copy it and put it here. Okay, so that's pretty much it for initializing the SDK. With a single line, the SDK is initialized, okay, and it's ready to be used. Now, the next thing I'm going to add is a method that will handle the button click. Okay, I will copy it and put it here, and let's go over the code here, right, line by line. So, whenever the login button is clicked, I'm going to log a line here saying on the login button clicked, right? I will invoke login widget class coming from AppID SDK, basically appid.get instance get login widget. I will set the text on the text view to authentication in progress, and I will do login widget.launch. Okay, so that's pretty much right. If I copy this line here, right, in 2 lines, how do you invoke the AppID login widget that will show the authentication UI and will ask users to log in. Now, to this login widget launch method, I'm providing, first of all, context, which is this, but also providing new authorization listener. Okay, so this is an interface that you need to implement whenever you want to listen to authorization results. And it has 3 methods: on authorization failure, on authorization canceled, and on authorization success. So besides just logging the result, right, on authorization success, you will get access token, identity token, and refresh token. Okay, so essentially those are the JWT tokens. They will be decoded for you and actually also parsed for you, right? So for example, if you command click access token, right, you will see that it will contain all the properties, the regular properties, right, coming from a base interface token that tokens contain. Okay, and actually right here, I'm going to run a UI thread runnable here that will hide the button. That's the login button. It will be hidden once I'm logged in, and it will update the text view with hello and identity token get name. Okay, so this is a very simple implementation. Launch login widget, and whenever authentication was successful, it will update the text view with the name of authenticated entity. So one last thing I will do before I actually run this application, I'll go to build Gradle module, right, and I will update my application ID, because I do know that underscores are not permitted in the application ID, right? So I will just remove those underscores here, and I'll make sure the application ID is valid. Okay, so now I can actually run this application on my emulator. Okay. So you can see that application is running on the emulator. I will click the login button. Okay, and immediately the login widget pops up, right? This is the authentication screen. Now, I already have user registered with my AppID instance. If I go to users, you will see a test user that I've created before. So that's exactly what I'm going to use to authenticate. Test user at test.com and the password. Okay, so the moment I click login button, right, login widget goes away and it says hello test user 123, and that's because this is what is defined as my username here. Okay, so basically what just happened is I've successfully authenticated with this user account, right, and my code has updated the text view to hello and the name of my user. Okay, so let's go here for a second and put a breakpoint, right? Because I do want to run it again with a breakpoint just to show you what exactly you can retrieve from access token and identity token. Okay, so I'm authenticating, right? I will try to authenticate again. Test user at test.com, test user. Okay, after successful authentication, right, I hit the breakpoint, and now you can see that access token, right, contains, first of all, the raw content of the token, right? So if you need the token in its raw form, for example, to send requests to protected resources, you can definitely get it here. It's the raw form of the token, but it also contains the decoded payload of the token. So you can see multiple name value pairs here. Right, so this is the information that was received from token. You got the issuer, expiration, audience. You got the authentication method reference. That's Cloud Directory. User was authenticated through Cloud Directory, right? And you even have some rules that I've set up for this user. Okay, and if you look at the identity token, right, it also contains the decoded payload. Okay, all the information, things like email, username, right, and different identities for that user. So this way you can leverage information available in access token and identity token and obviously refresh token in your application. So that's it for this tutorial, right? You've seen how I implemented this part, right? You've seen how application can trigger authentication, obtain user access token and ID token, and retrieve information using those tokens. So that's it for this time, and thank you for watching.